Good morning one and all. Welcome to my today's class. Before I begin with lesson number 7, I would say a heartful thanks to one and all who have liked my video, who have subscribed. Thank you. So today let us start with lesson number 7 of standard 10th, The Girl Who Was Anne Frank. The Girl Who Was Anne Frank is written by Louis De Jong. Louis De Jong was a journalist and had written articles on Anne Frank in Reader's Digest in October in the year 1957. If you see to the pre-reading activity, children, you will find the words, have you heard of Adolf Hitler? What is uppermost in your mind when you think of him? These are the two sentences which are given in your textbook. So we all know Adolf Hitler was a leader of the Nazi Germany. He had a long-lasting hatred for the Jews, the Jewish people. He used to either kill them or he used to put them in the concentration camps. So here also in Anne Frank, the lesson begins with a question which an argumentative student once asked his professor. The question the student asked was, how do you know that the human race is worth saving? The professor answered saying, I have heard, I have heard of Anne Frank and I have read the diary of Anne Frank. The professor says that he had read the diary of Anne Frank. Anne Frank was a Jewish girl who had written the life experiences in a diary. This diary had been published in many languages after Annie's death. Nobody knew about this diary when she was living. She lived only for 15 years. This girl, short-lived. It was only after her death the diary was found by her father, and then it was his mission in life to publish the diary. So now let us see to the lesson point-wise. Coming to the first, second and the third points. A young boy asks the question to a professor and the professor answers to it. Just now I have explained to you what was the question and what was the answer by the professor. It is discussed how this girl's diary came to be written and saved in the form of a story or a drama. No one could foretell how much impact this diary would have. The father who had published it also did not know how much impact it would have on the people. Annie had died in a Nazi concentration camp where this Hitler used to take the Jewish people and put in the concentration camps. So it was here that Annie had died. Annie, her mother, her sister, all had died in a concentration camp. Anne Frank's diary was published in 19 different languages, including German. Nearly 2 million copies were sold. Francis Goodrich, Albert Hackett presented the story of Annie in the form of a play for which they won the Pulitzer Prize for drama. There is a prize which is kept for drama, and it was these two great men who had won that prize. In London, the play ran for 6 months at Phoenix Theatre. It was an open theatre where it ran for 6 months. And as a film by 20th Century Fox. Coming to the fourth, fifth and the sixth point, it is necessary for us to know who this girl Annie was. In Germany, Hitler was in power and Otto Frank was Annie's father. He was a banker in Germany. He had married in the year 1925. In the year 1926, he had his first daughter, Margot, and after 3 years, he had Anneliese Marie, his second daughter. So, Margot and Anneliese Marie were sisters. Annie was usually called as Anneliese Marie was her full name. Anneliese Marie was called as Annie or Tender One. Margot and Anneliese Marie were sisters. Anneliese Marie was commonly called as, usually she was called lovingly, she was called as Annie or a Tender One. In the year 1933, Hitler was issuing anti-Jewish decree. At this time, Otto Frank decided to emigrate to Netherlands. There he started a small firm in Amsterdam. He also had a partner, Mr. Van Daan, who was also a refugee. So they both traded in spices. The business which they both traded in was spices. The business was slow. The staff of Otto Frank liked his warm personality. They worked for him even for less wages. What they admired in Otto Frank was his courage and the care he took for his daughter's education, the two daughters he had. He took care of their education. So the staff who worked under him, the staff who worked for him, they were ready to work even for less wages. Annie was an average girl, not very brilliant. Her sister Margot was more promising. Annie was a girl who took interest in other people. She was emotional, strong-willed. She was a great talker and fond of nice clothes. So Annie, she was fond of friends, people, clothes, a happy-go-lucky girl. She had many girlfriends. Her family was a middle-class family and could hardly afford for a holiday. They didn't even own a car, so hardly her father took her out. So she would enjoy her life with her friends. Friends and the other people surrounding her were her life. Coming to the 8th point, the Nazis, that is the police of the Adolf Hitler. Nazi was a party which belonged to Adolf Hitler. So these Nazis invaded Netherlands in the year 1940. May 1940, they invaded Netherlands. Knew Otto Frank. Now, Otto Frank, who had decided to move to her hiding place, he moved to an annex with his family members and his business partner and their family. Otto Frank, who had started spices business with one of his friend, Van Daan. So they both decided to move with their families to some hiding place. An annex is called as attic, a room built on top of a house. In the year 1942, Margot Frank was called for deportation. Here deportation means to force a person to leave the country. But Margot did not go. She was forced to leave the country, but Margot did not go. They all moved to the hiding place. Later, a dentist joined them. He was also a Jew. He also was a Jew. So coming to point number 10, there were 8 people in the hiding place. No sound, no light from the annex. The only link was a radio which they had. There were 2 typists who brought food, magazines, books. The only other company they had was a cat. Not dog, they had a cat. Coming to point number 11, Annie's father had presented a diary on her 13th birthday. She described life in the annex, the tensions, the quarrels. She had written about the thoughts and feelings of an adolescent girl. She was a girl aged 13 years. Her father had given her a diary and her experience in the hiding place was very bad. No friends, no people to talk, no light, No sound. So this was her life in the annex. She had written her experiences in this diary. She had mentioned about her loneliness. She said that she feels like a bird whose wings are brutally torn and who is flying in utter darkness against the bars of its own cage. Her life in the annex was like the life of a bird whose wings were cut off and it was left in the cage. In its own cage it was left. She stayed isolated for 16 months, and this diary contained every moment she experienced in the annex. Later, Mape, a typist, gave Annie an extra book, an ordinary exercise book she gave. Later, Annie wrote in Margot's chemistry exercise book, the diary which her father had given her. The pages in the diary, they were over. Then she wrote in an exercise book. Then she wrote in the chemistry practical book. Coming to point number 12. In point number 12, we can see that Annie trusted her father more than her mother. Her mother never understood her. The first kiss she exchanged with Van Dan's 17-year-old son could never be shared with anybody because she never thought her mother to be a friend of hers. Her mother never understood her. She could not discuss certain things with her mother, which girls of her age usually like to share with mothers because her mother never treated her as a friend. See children, nowadays girls treat mother as a friend, share so many things with the mother. Today's mother also being educated, being so much understanding, they can understand the daughter's feelings. Today's mother cares, understands a child better. So you people are lucky to have a mother like this. Be thankful to her. Always be thankful to your parents, for they have given you a better life. They understand you better. There was nobody to understand Annie at the age of 13, when we all need our parents, a mother to understand us, a father to understand us. Annie had none. Though her father was there, though her mother was there, they never understood the feelings of this adolescent girl. Coming to point number 13. Annie wanted her diary to be published, and she had written those names on a slip of paper. She wanted different names in case of publication. She kept this a secret and did not share it with anyone, not even the dentist with whom she shared her room. She kept her diary and the other books she had written in her father's briefcase. The father never read what his daughter had written. He only read it after Annie's death. Coming to point number 15, on August 4th, 1944, it so happened that when German and 4 Dutch Nazi policemen entered the secret place, the annex where they were staying, where they were hiding, where Annie and her father were staying, the policemen inquired for gold, jewels, and they collected all they could find. They emptied the briefcase but did not pay any heed to the notebooks, to the diary which were there in that. They arrested the people staying in the annex. They took away the gold, the jewels, but they left the diary, the other books there itself. The Franks, the Van Dans, and the dentist were carried in cattle trucks to a Nazi death camp in southern Poland, Auschwitz. The place was Auschwitz. There was a Nazi concentration camp there, and the Franks and the Van Dans who were found in the annex were all carried to Auschwitz. And Auschwitz, the Nazis separated Otto Frank from his wife and daughters. The women were put in another concentration camp and the men were put in a separate concentration camp. Mrs. Frank, Annie, Margot were taken to the women's camp. Here Mrs. Frank died of exhaustion. Poor lady, she died of exhaustion. The other side, the Van Dans and the dentist lost their lives. In the women's camp at Auschwitz, Annie proved to be a courageous leader. When they were not given anything to eat, Annie would boldly enter the kitchen and ask food. She saw the Hungarian Jewish children who were made to stand naked in the freezing rain. They were made to stand in a line in the freezing rain because Hitler had ordered them to throw the children in the gas chambers. They were made to stand there. Why? Because they were to be thrown in the gas chambers. She never feared of this. Annie never feared seeing all this. She also told her sister Margot never to give up. Her sister Margot was not bold like Annie, but Annie always told her sister, be bold enough. We have to bear all this in the concentration camps. So point number 18. Later, Annie and her sister were transported to another camp, which was in Belsen. It was a concentration camp between Berlin and Hamburg, Belsen. So there they were taken. She was observed by one of her friends. She had her head shaved. She was cold and hungry. Her skeleton-like form dripped in a cloth of concentration camp, very thin. Annie had become very thin. She had typhoid fever and had gone too weak. She died in the year 1945. Her sister too had died a few days earlier. Margot had died earlier, then Annie died in the year 1945. They both, that is Annie and Margot, were buried in a mass grave. Both were buried in a mass grave. Coming to point number 19. On the other side, Otto Frank, who was in the Auschwitz camp, happened to survive. He was freed in the year 1945 by the Russians. He came back to Amsterdam. There he met a friend, and his friend told him that his wife had died. Otto Frank kept waiting for his two children, for his two girls. But later, say after 6 weeks, he met a friend who told him, he met someone, a friend, maybe a friend, who told him his daughters had also perished. So his daughters had also died. So Mape the typist handed over Annie's diary to Otto Frank. So now after Annie's death, Otto Frank came back to that annex, and there he found Mape. And Mape handed over the diary of Anne Frank to Otto Frank. Mape had recognized the writings of Annie, and she collected all the books, the diaries, which were preserved by her. She never read them. She did not know what Annie had written. She now reads and realizes that Annie had written all about the help typist she herself, Mape, and the other people had given to Frank's family. Mape says that if she had read it, then surely she would have destroyed the diary for safety purpose. She did not read, they were lying there only, and now after Annie's death, when they came back, when Otto Frank was freed, Mape, Otto Frank both came to the annex and they found it, and they found the diary. Point number 21. Otto Frank took many days to read what his child had written. He broke down after every few pages. He started copying the manuscript. He left some passages that he felt would hurt people, other people's feelings. He gave one copy to his close friend, who gave it to a professor of modern history. He devoted an article to it in Dutch newspaper. After reading this article, many of his friends asked Otto Frank to have Annie's diary published as per her wish. Annie had written in her diary that her diary should be published in the form of a story. In one of the paragraphs she had written, she wanted to publish a book named The Annex After the War. Finally, Annie's father decided to publish it. Two of the publishers refused to publish this book. Later, a third one accepted it, and he published this book and sold 1,50,000 copies of Dutch edition. If you see in point number 22, in Britain 2,50,000 copies were sold, in Japan almost 2,50,000 copies were sold, in USA 4,35,000 copies were sold. So in this way, in each and every country the copies were sold and the story of Annie was read all over the world. Otto Frank started receiving hundreds of letters. They poured out their trouble. One girl compares her own life story to that of Annie's and says she doesn't know where her story begins and where Annie's story ends. Her story and Anne Frank's story was similar. So she says, I do not know where my story begins and where Anne Frank's story ends. Many people sent gifts, presents. Some Japanese girls sent handmade dolls. People used to send flowers on Annie and Margot's birthday. Coming to point number 23, 24 and 25. Otto Frank received many letters. He retired from his business and he used to answer to all the letters personally. Every day he was reminded of his sufferings, the pains, the losses. One headmistress of England wrote, it must be a source of deep joy to you in all your sorrows. So these were the words of a headmistress of England. There was a remarkable response from Germany. Many booksellers feared to sell the books. Nearly 4,500 copies came out in Germany. The story was depicted in the form of a play in 7 German cities. No one knew how audiences would react. No Nazis were seen on stage, and his father, a lonely old man, would go on the stage and speak out about his wife, about his children. Lastly, he would say, in spite of everything, people are still good at heart. So these were his words. Isn't it touching? After suffering so much of pain and loss, he still says, in spite of everything, people are still good at heart. Coming to point 26, 27, the German audiences received Anne Frank's tragedy in silence, heavy with remorse, in shame. People did not go out during the interval. They sat on their seats as if they were afraid of the lights outside, ashamed to face each other. The producer of the film said that each one should watch because it enables the audiences to come to grips with the history. Everyone should watch it to know the history. So, each one watched it with the most humble, pitiful terms of inhumanity. They watched it with pitiful terms of inhumanity to fellow men. It was because of what? Only racial discrimination. Though no one accused them, they accused themselves for the treatment met out to the Jews by the Nazis. How the Jews were treated by the Nazis was very shameful. For years, the administration of Germany post-war was toiled hard. They worked hard to make the people see the senseless and the criminal nature of Nazi reign. But they all failed. It was this diary of Anne Frank that succeeded in making them open their eyes to the cruelty of the racial treatment. Many German children wrote letters saying that Annie's diary had opened their eyes. The people of Berlin had chosen her name to symbolize the spirit of racial and social tolerance. In Germany, an organization was set up after the name of Annie. In Vienna, money was collected for Anne Frank forest to be planted in Israel. So some collected money to do something in the name of Anne Frank. There was an organization set up on her name. Coming to point number 28, a Hamburg student suggested that flowers should be laid on the mass graves in Bergen-Belsen, where Anne Frank had found her last resting place. More than 2,000 young people agreed to this. Hundreds of them pedaled on bikes in rain. A 17-year-old girl standing in front of the grave expressed her grief, saying Anne Frank was younger than her and she had suffered so much of pain and ended her life horribly. Why? Just because of racial discrimination? She had to die because others decided to destroy her race? She said, never again such an inhuman treatment should arise among the humans. Never a human should treat another human in such a horrible way. Lastly, the author says, Annie's brief life is only a beginning. Annie carries the message of courage, tolerance all over the world. She carries the message of courage and tolerance all over the world. Annie lives even after her death. So, this is all about Anne Frank, children. Hope you all have understood. It is a painful story of a small girl, of a 13-year-old girl, her feelings, her experiences. Why? Because she had done nothing. Just because of the racial discrimination, she had to suffer losses. So, coming to the examination point of view, which was the party led by Adolf Hitler? Nazi party. What is a decree? It is an order having force of law. It is an order having force of law. Questions which usually appear for 1 mark. What do you mean by emigrate? To emigrate. To emigrate means to leave the country permanently and to go to live to some another country. What was Annie's father? Mention Otto Frank's family. Why did Otto Frank migrate to Netherlands? What qualities did the staff admire? Why did Frank go in a hiding place? What is an annex? What did Anne Frank record in her diary? How did Anne Frank compare herself to a songbird? What does Anne Frank reveal about her mother in her diary? What was Anne Frank called as? These are the 1 mark questions likely to appear. Who was Mape? Mape was a typist. What message does the life of Annie carry? Courage and tolerance. Coming to 3 mark questions. Why is Annie called a courageous leader? Mission of Otto Frank's life. How did the German audience respond to the tragic play of Anne Frank? Narrate the events where we see the glimpses of Nazi cruelty. How did Annie's diary open the eyes of Germans to the viciousness of racial persecution? These are the 3 mark questions. The reference to context may be like, in spite of everything, I still believe that people are still good. Or it may be like, how do you know that human race is worth saving? Or a real problem child. Oh look, their eyes. When Annie and Margot were living in the Auschwitz camp, the Nazi children would stand in a line to be thrown in the gas chambers. At that time it was said by Annie, oh look, their eyes. So this is all about Anne Frank, children. Hope you all have understood it. Hope you have liked this video. So if you have liked this video, what you have to do? Like, share and subscribe. Thank you.